Good morning. In examining why the modern family keeps moving, I will open by looking at certain ironies of healthy human settlement, and then review related aspects of the American experience during the 20th century. In a provocative 1998 essay entitled Nomads and Settlers, the British anthropologist Hugh Brody provides a fine portrait of life on the small family farm, the place oft cited by me, among others, as the foundation of a healthy human-scale community. A family is busy in the countryside, he writes. Mother is baking bread, churning butter, attending the hens and ducks, preparing food for everyone. Father is in the fields, plowing the soil, cutting wood, fixing walls, providing sustenance. Children explore and play and help and sit at the family table. Grandma or grandpa sits in a chair by the fire. Every day is long and filled with the activities of this family, all given purpose and comfort by a piece of the countryside at the center of which is home. He concludes, with sincerity, the family in its farm is the family where it belongs, a place of integration where work, play, childhood, and age all share a safe and secure home. And yet, he underscores the ironies of life on the family farm. To begin with, he reminds his readers that farmland left in God's care is forest or savanna. In contrast, the family farm is a determined and persistent struggle to make sure that God does not get the to himself. Rather than some new Eden, the family farm demands hard and never-ending labor from husband, wife, and children alike. Trees must be cut down with their roots dragged from the soil. Stones must be removed every year from the field. Alien plants must be pulled up again and again. Animals need constant care. Drought must be combated. As God himself explained the matter to Adam, "Cursed is the ground because of you. In the sweat of your face you shall bread till you return to the ground." Moreover, Brody notes that the family farm creates its own human instability. It is a matter of biology. Agriculturalists want large families. The underlying cause may be an instinctive human desire for many children. Yet the incentives of the small farm surely welcome offspring as little workers in the shared family enterprise. In fact, the farm family has been, quote, a world historical center for human reproduction. For several centuries, first in Europe, then in North America, Australia, and Southern Africa, rural families have borne 6 to 9 children. And yet, this remarkable fecundity created the necessity of migration. Why? Well, simple farms. The small family farm could not be divided effectively among 8, 6, or even 2 children and still sustain a family of the next generation. The home farm must pass intact to only one of the children. On top of this, the common shortage of nearby available land means that the majority of offspring, when grown and married, must move to new places. A great agrarian diaspora. As Brody explains, throughout the history of agriculture, all over the world, on newfound lands, migrants make their family farms. There they have many children who also have many children. These children then move on, pushing the frontier outwards and reaches its limits. In the end, the farming makes a home that most must leave, to colonize new places, again, driven by a restless search for new land. Indeed, we can see this process still at work today. Consider the old order Amish. In 1800, these agriculturalists numbered about 5,000, almost all of them nearby in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Yet their large families, combined unavailability of new land there, led to the great Amish diaspora, one continuing, even accelerating, in the early 21st century. The Amish first founded colonies in Ohio and Indiana, and when those filled up, new generations on to colonize different places: Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, and other strangely empty lands. In the end, again, with a certain irony, it turns out that the successful farm family makes a home that most have to leave. In addressing my theme, why the modern keeps moving, I also want to examine why the older Amish have found of late relative empty lands in the upper Mississippi and Ohio River valleys. In her valuable book, The Transformation of Rural Life, Southern Illinois, 1890 to 1990, another anthropologist, Jane Addams, analyzes in depth the changes over 100 years in the economy and community life of Union County, Illinois. As late as 1940, she reports, the agriculture-based economy of this place is intact. Its family farms, specialized in fruits and vegetables, sent north for sale in Chicago. Small dairy and poultry operations were common. The collective butchering of hogs remained a community ritual. A few small factories making wooden shipping crates and shoes provided supplements to farm income. And while strained by the Great Depression of the 1930s, Union County's towns and villages were still vital, active places. The town squares and the local shops busy, the schools full of children. Rural Union homes retained their multiple functions as workshop, warehouse, mess hall, dormitory, recreation center, infirmary, and funeral parlor for the farm and the people who worked on it. And women's and children's hard work was approvingly contrasted with urban idleness. Wendell Berry reports a similar story from the Ohio River Valley. During the 1930s, the economies of many households were still small and thorough. These Americans practiced household husbandry, tended gardens, fattened meat hogs, milked cows, kept flocks of chickens, used horses or mules for field work, and employed little children in their labors. These enterprises, quote, comprised the direct bond between farm and household, unquote. This apparent rural stability in the pre-war Mississippi and Ohio River valleys was reflected in Census Bureau numbers. In 1900, the total U.S. farm population had reached 9.9 million persons. In 1917, 32.5 million Americans lived on farms. By 1940, the number on farms still remained just that record figure. Another 30 million Americans were in small towns and villages, servicing the farms. Horsepower remained competitive with internal combustion engines. While the number of tractors had grown from 1,000 in 1910 to 1.4 million in 1940, the number of draft horses still active on farms in that latter year was 10 million. In the agriculture-dominated state of Iowa, a special 1935 census showed that the number of farms had reached a record 222,000 in that state, with an average size of 155 acres. The state's villages were whole and alive. Rural enthusiast Johnson Brigham aptly labeled Iowa a commonwealth of small towns, one that is rising superior to all obstacles and fast fulfilling its destiny. The culture of rural America was also vital. In his wonderful book, Kinship with the Land, historian E. Bradford Burns recounts flowering of regionalist thought, writing, and art in Iowa between 1894 and 1942. As late as that end year, most of the population worked the land one way or another. The others in Iowa depended on it. Rich black soil cut as many furrows into the rural inhabitants as they did into its land, close, abundant, productive, all-embracing, not only the economic contours of Iowa, but the social and cultural contours as well. As Grant Wood, creator of the iconic American Gothic, explained, "At heart, I'm a farmer. Pretty darn good farmer, too. Things grow for me. I'm pretty strongly rooted, and I like to be home." His summer art colony in the tiny village of Stone City embodied the American regional artistic revival. Writing in her novel New Hope, the Iowa author Ruth Suckow described the culture of the iconic Iowa village. All were fellow citizens. All had their share in helping to build up the town. Everywhere could be felt the sense of natural comradeship, being all together at the start and working together for the future. The great churning of World War II leveled a death stroke on this still complete world. Following government decrees, young adults poured off the land, the men to foreign wars, the women to urban and factories. 40 million Americans, more than 1 out of every 4, moved for reasons of war between 1942 and 1945. Jane Addams reports that by early 1944, 1,357 Union men, over half of their age cohort, were in the military. Labor shortages hit farms hard. In response, real horsepower finally gave way to a surge in tractors. Nationwide, the number of tractors rose nearly 4-fold during the 1940s. Federal agencies also moved into the countryside. Anticipated by the New Deal, this change became a torrent after 1941. Without people being fully aware of it, right, Adams, the Union County economy shifted from dependence on agriculture and light manufacturing to a heavy reliance on government services. As warface and government bureaucracies transformed rural women into wage workers, the once creative home economy changed as well. As Adams explains, they no longer had the time to raise a garden and put up quantities of food. Industrial food processors in distant places supplanted them. She continues, at the same time that the informal net of rural life were becoming frayed, one of the pillars of rural communities, rural school, was displaced as well. To make modern education, Illinois officials launched school consolidation drives. In the very hearts of small towns, their schools disappeared. In more literary fashion, Wendell Berry describes the same consequences. The end of the multitude of small farm-centered communities. The death of a distinctive agrarian civilization. With the coming of war, he writes, country people began to move to the cities, and the machines moved from the cities into the fields. The good farm economy weakened and withered. After 1945, Berry reports, the picture puzzle that had been an ancestral home became less complete. The lost pieces were not replaced. Also disappearing were the tasks that only true communities could provide. The care of the old, the care and education of children, family life, neighborly work, the handing down of memory, the care of the earth, respect for nature and watchers. Government took over the care of the old and the education of children, the other tasks mostly abandoned. Census Bureau numbers again reflect and reinforce this tale of rapid rural migration or depopulation. The U.S. farm population fell from 30.5 million in 1940 to 23 million by 1950 and to only 7.5 million in 1970. Farm children disappeared at an even more rapid pace, turning most remaining farms into working old folks' homes. In February 1942, Grant Wood, the great apostle of Iowa artistic regionalism, died. Ruth Suckow also published her last Iowa-centered novel that year. Other Iowa writers, poets, and artists scattered. Words that sum up the war experience for the whole of America, Dr. Burr writes, Iowans lifted their sights to global horizons, and they thus far have found it difficult to focus internally again. This was the way of life These were the communities, such were the cultural possibilities that World War II, sometimes called the Good War, crushed. Now, some with deterministic bent would argue that this agrarian America, created by the first great wave of family farmers in the 19th century, was doomed in any case. If so, the Good War sharply accelerated that process. Evident here is this difference, or the distinction between a mobility measured by generations and driven by abundant fertility, as found among true agriculturalists, and a mobility measured by mere years and driven by war and waste, as found in the modern welfare-warfare state. World War II marked a great divide in social history, where American families quickly severed their bonds to the agrarian and village ways shaped the prior century, and became again, albeit in a very new way, restless nomads searching for community. In this quest, most families turn to the suburbs, but that must be a subject for another day. Thank you.